Hi and welcome everyone to this episode of Breakpoint. The topic for today is decoding security metrics for business risks. Our guest for today is Runa Desai Dalal. She's a cyber risk leader at Accenture.
Seen people have started, you know, things which were typically even done manually have become more digitized, right?
Then everybody will be buying it for free, which means loss of X amount.
Tighten and strengthen their screws on them from a security and data protection point of view.
Take on, if I was a non-security leader, how I would think about it. Welcome to Breakpoint Security Podcast, folks. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of smart security teams and their cutting-edge security and engineering practices. We'll share fun and engaging stories about clever optimization techniques that scale your defenses and also keep your data safe. Tune in and be a part of the conversation where exciting innovation meets real-world application in cybersecurity. Welcome to Breakpoint, Runa.
Thank you, Nilo. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. My first experience in a podcast, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Awesome. How are you feeling today?
Great, great. Yeah, it's a wonderful Saturday afternoon and talking to the fantastic Neelu here. So nothing could be better.
Okay, so I have been quite impressed by your statements that your responses, your experiences that you've shared across various conferences that we have been in together, and that's why I really wanted to have you on the podcast.
I'm
So
honored.
truly welcome.
Thank you.
So one of the areas that I was quite interested in when you talked about your experience earlier was security metrics and the whole world of how do you actually not just capture metrics but also measure them, and how do have the right kind of interpretation of these metrics so that you can look at risks in this. And I think many of our audience, especially security teams who are working hard towards getting the right kind of security posture, also want to first of all have a visibility of the posture, and for that you need metrics a lot. Anybody who has led teams, who has been a leader, manager in security, or is even a senior level leader, always has to first go through the challenge of understanding what metrics to capture and how to look at all of this. So this has been an area that I think has been there since we have had security teams on this side.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right, Neelu. So I'll tell you, we've been in the thick of cybersecurity, I would say implementations and monitoring and managing the whole cybersecurity landscape for many many years now, right? If I mean my own career spanning about 2 decades, and that is where somewhere it kind of started about 2 decades ago when people started taking it more seriously. Right, monitoring and understanding where my gaps are, risks are, all those kind of things. That is number one. Number two, we've seen in the last, ever at least just before COVID and during COVID also, that your perpetrators, your breaches, your hackers, as we call them, have gotten more and more sophisticated, and the business is getting affected. Earlier, it used to be, oh, it's an IT problem, IT needs to solve it. So nobody in the business was really looking at it, or nobody was really paying attention. They said it's too technical, we don't understand it, we don't know what we want to do about it. Now with some of these solar winds and NotPetya and your
uh,
the classic, the big names, right? And
yeah.
recently CrowdStrike, well, it was not even a breach that we all know, right? We've concluded it was no breach
Yes,
or anything. It was just a mishandling of certain things.
it was just a
But having
scare,
said
as I would say.
exactly, yeah. Right. But at the same time, it has affected business, right? All of these, incidents have affected business. And therefore, what has started happening is people on the business side, whether it's your chief financial officer, your chief marketing officer, your board of directors, and obviously your CEO, has started asking, you know, what are we doing? And also, of course, yes, so one is these things have started affecting business. Secondly, there's obviously a huge advent of digitization. It's not no longer just a buzzword, right? And during COVID, post-COVID, we've seen people have started, you know, things which were typically even done manually have become more digitized, right? If I
Yeah,
call
yeah.
it, right? So looking at that, and the more connected we are, and now with AI, Gen AI, lot of data that we handle, so people want to know, are we secure? And if we are, how are we measuring it? You know, if I am secure in one area, how is it impacting another area of business for me, or another, so it's that correlation that is happening. Also, yes, 2 decades ago, people started implementing cybersecurity solutions, right? You started having a SOC, people started doing pen tests, people started, I'm sorry, doing risk assessments. But then it started becoming, everything became siloed. Everybody wanted to have their own sort of department, right? And their own territory, that, oh, this is our domain, this is that domain. And then we realize in something like a CrowdStrike, where when a process is not followed in a vulnerability management patching exercise, why the process was not followed is somebody else's domain. Vulnerability patch management, whether it was required or not required, is in somebody else's domain. When those two people don't talk to each other is when you have these kind of incidents. And that is the kind of metrics that the business wants to see. I don't want to see how many vulnerabilities I have in my system. I don't want to only see how many SOC incidents occurred or didn't occur in my system, right? So how do I correlate? If there are so many SOC incidents, how are they affecting my business? So that's the whole, I would say, the thought process that came to our minds when a lot of clients, when I was in a Big Four, were asking us that, do you have a solution for this? Is when we started thinking about, understanding what metrics are. Metrics have been around. Nobody, we've been measuring, right? Like, measurements have been
Hmm.
around for a while, but metrics that give me actionable insights, where is that coming from? And how do you
Yes.
define that?
Yeah, right. And while you were talking about expertise, and I was thinking this expertise has also brought in a lot of automation, right? We were talking about
Correct.
digitization that is also reflecting in the security product space. And
Mm.
today we have tons of security products for
Yeah.
everything, just like you said. And that's not just like in the network side, like with the firewalls, IDS, IPS, you have WAFs, you have cloud security posture management tools, and then you have, of course, the application security tools. There is so much across an IT
So,
organization
mm,
just with respect to security tooling that sometimes, and I think this is the first big challenge that we encounter when we go for even trying to think about metrics, right? First
mm,
is the data overload part, because we have so much data, because all of these
mm,
products are now giving you vulnerabilities,
mm.
giving you findings, giving you threats, giving
Yeah.
you so many indicators
Yeah.
that you have too many data points to look at.
Correct.
So, and there is not just data points, there's also a lot of complexity, because all the tools and products are giving their vulnerabilities, issues in different formats.
Yeah.
And actually have different kind of outcomes that they're trying to show through their own reporting. So all of them have different reporting structure as well.
Correct.
So
True.
now how do you streamline this part, like ground up when you start, how do you
Yeah.
streamline this data overload and complexity issue?
Interesting question. So, and this is something, I always say this is not an IT problem. This is not a cyber problem. It's a business problem. Okay.
Okay.
I am building, yes, I need my WAF and I need my IDS and I need my IPS. I mean, nobody's denying you that, right? But with all these tools and technologies, what am I protecting in the organization? Am I protecting infrastructure and applications which are very critical for my business to run? Let's take an example, right? So, for example, in a bank, and I know banks. I mean, it's a very rudimentary, very common example. But then the thing is, because the financial services industry is far more matured from a cybersecurity,
Yeah,
implementation
definitely.
stand, right? So it's easier to take that example. So now in a bank, your core banking solution, and most of us with the IT and security background have worked with some sort of a core banking solution, which forms sort of the heart of the organization of a bank, basically of a bank. Now my IPS, my IDS, my firewall, my SOC, my application security, and as we call it, the attack surface management, whole platform is, let's say, focused only on the core banking, but because it is a very critical system for me, right? And therefore, when all the metrics, all the logs, all the data that gets generated from these systems, it is protecting, managing, monitoring only that particular application. Yes, because it is business critical. But having said that, security, as we always say, the weakest, the smallest link is its weakest link also at times, right? Because somewhere somebody's sitting doing something and has left some back door open, and
Yeah.
somebody is managing to exploit that and come in through there, then what am I going to do? How am I going to protect myself? Because I don't even know where that system is, or who or why that backdoor was left open over there. Now these are the considerations, and therefore yes, it can become some, most organizations say it's a financial burden. I cannot sit and manage and monitor every system of mine, number one. Number two, if you want me to then if manage each and every system in my organization, the amount of data that it will generate, if you want me to give you a measurement around it, it's next to impossible.
Hmm.
So the metrics that I should be building should give me my risk posture, should tell me what is my effectiveness from an operations perspective, and tell me strategically if I am protected or not,
Okay.
right? So number of incidents, number of true positives generated out of an IDS or IPS, right? And in which systems are these true positives being detected, right? Can you measure that? Can you correlate that, right? Is there somebody who's sitting and doing that and then giving me the metrics? That is very critical and important. So it's not
Okay.
just about, closing in into the two or three, like in a manufacturing organization, your ERP is very critical. But we've seen in the past in a manufacturing organization, sometimes my third party is weak and therefore then I am getting attacked because of my third party,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I think it
So
happened in Equifax as well.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. We have tons of such incidents, right? Then there was the other incident where, the whole shipping industry came to a standstill because some small town person. Now, that is the other correlationship that I need to do. So that is something what we call it as a supply chain risk. So there are these, so within my risk posture also, then I have technology risk. And then there is, humans are always the weakest link at times. So that is my people risk. Now, in my people risk also, it's not just about, running security awareness programs and things like that, or identifying these very high end sort of technical people, but who cannot speak to a chief, say, financial officer or somebody in the business operations, for example. Business operations
Hmm.
guy will say, I don't need to do this security awareness training. I don't deal with, security. So why do I need to do this training? While I know a lot of organizations now mandate that as an, this thing, but what is the outcome of that? Is that person having understood what is the importance of that person not keeping the laptop open in a coffee shop while working, or sharing password with somebody else? Basic things, right? Basic hygiene things. Measuring that is difficult, yes, but important at the same time. Collecting data on all these aspects, yes, is an exercise. Yes, is cumbersome, but trust me, it is a one-time exercise. And now with a lot of automation coming in, once you have identified this is the critical data that I need to build these critical metrics, which measure my risk posture and my cyber posture, my operating effectiveness and efficiencies, it becomes a lot easier then. So identifying the data which is critical for me, having a one-time ingestion mechanism, if I can call it that, right? That, this is the data that needs to come in from my IDS, IPS. I don't need everything. I need only 3 or 4 elements out of my report, right? Or from my vulnerability management, I only need 2 or 3 elements from there. And then that back end calculation, then you almost become a statistician, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
because you are trying to correlate data. So yeah, we at one point ended up looking for data scientists because we didn't understand, how to correlate data at times. And
Hmm.
maybe the how do I say this, the 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 information that it was trying to tell us, right? We understand, yes, A and B separately, but correlating A and B together and telling my CEO, this is where we are the weakest, this is where we need to spend more money, this is where we need to maybe refocus our efforts. That is something that, for that you need sometimes a mindset of a data scientist as well. So it's not just security professionals plus a data scientist. So it's a new skill that could come up and
No, definitely. I think we tend to do a lot, like you're highlighting, on our own,
yeah,
but with all the kind of the abundance of information and the newness of a lot of technologies that we're dealing with, these overlapping skills, I'm sure, is very, very important. You should be able to identify the right skills that you need and
correct.
get the right folks. But
Yeah,
while you were talking about the business, and I was just thinking that if business has to prioritize something, it needs to be
yeah,
business risk.
yeah,
And for us to arrive at business risk, we
yeah,
need to know, since we're talking about correlation, we need to know the context.
right.
So context has been a big thing in terms of how do you interpret the context interpretation so once you have the data, you've structured it correctly, now you're trying to correlate. Now we are at a place where we want to sort of derive actual business risks out
Mm,
of this,
mm,
and for that we'll need to interpret the context very well, like that is coming from these threads, these different patterns that we are trying to derive and
yeah,
things. So how do we actually go about that next step where we
sure.
have all of this data, we've structured it well, and now we're thinking of deriving actual business risks out of these, because I believe that every business has different things that they'll prioritize, and hence how do
Absolutely.
we go about that?
Sure. So usually, I mean, and this is like an easy, quick win, as we call that, right? Is typically most businesses are scared of audit findings. Yeah.
Thankfully, they
Yeah,
are.
I know.
Is our
So,
bread
right,
and butter is running
exactly.
through.
Yeah, especially if you have to if you fall in the this thing of SOX, where you have to be compliant with SOX regulations and
Hmm.
therefore ITGC and even SOC 2, right? You are a supplier or a vendor for a larger organization, and there, those they want to know how you are managing their IT systems and their IT infrastructure, etc., and what are the controls in place. So in those scenarios, if you get audit findings, typically also, but I'll tell you, while they are scared of audit findings, a lot of times also what happens, okay, so what? What do you want me to do? Right? That's a typical question. Like I've gone
Yeah.
on a lot of these audit committee meetings, these board meetings, where we've done a cyber assessment and we've said, you are weak here and there. And I'm telling you, in a room full of people who have this immense knowledge on business, right? An immense knowledge of managing large organizations, when you go and tell them that, you are not monitoring all your critical systems, or that, your access governance is seriously lacking because you are not doing a user access review on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, as the case may be. So what?
I think just sorry to stop you there,
No,
but
no, no problem.
it's such a keen observation that you have. This is something that I've heard, and this is like starting from the streets to the castle. You will hear these two words, so what? Your developer will tell you so what. The managers will tell you
Absolutely.
so what.
Correct.
Everybody on the engineering side will tell you so what,
Absolutely.
and of
Yeah,
course the leadership will tell you so what. So
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
You're so right. You're so right. Yeah, I know. And yeah, you absolutely hit the nail. So when these questions kept coming, and that is when we said, okay, fine, let's take it a step further, right? And so which is why I've taken the example of audit findings, because it's easier for people to relate to. There are obviously other interpretations as well that are available. And for that, so okay, let's say user access review, right? And we've seen a lot of times when you leave a person's access unrevoked, right? And the person, let's say, is able to, there is logic. No, but that person has been thrown out of the system, so they don't have the company laptop. So what if the ID had remained active in my SAP? It doesn't matter, that person is not going to be accessed. You never know. How do you guarantee that, right? And that is why that is one of these audit findings that I'm telling you, it is, Nilo, it's almost frustrating the amount of times this kind of an audit finding has been coming up. At least in the last 10 years, I have seen this at least 3 times in an organization, and people just don't seem to be learning their
Now
lesson.
we have the example of things like Capital One,
Yeah.
because the AWS and data compromise that happened was through such unrevoked access. But yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, right. So yeah, so the point is, yes, you have, while you have these real life examples, and God forbid you don't want to give those kind of live examples, right? You want to be able to explain to them the business implication and I think now people are scared of data loss. Yeah. So
Hmm.
anything and everything, if you are able to correlate to say, I'm going to lose customer data, or I'm going to lose critical business financial data, and in some cases in a product organization, in a pharmaceutical organization, is that your product before it is launched, or your secret formulae, before they are actually put out in the market as a generic
Hmm.
drug, especially in a pharmaceutical kind of an organization.
Your intellectual property is
Exactly.
being,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So those are the things that people are a little wary of. And that, because they know that it correlates directly to my business. So, which is the correlationship that people. So I'll tell you, while earlier I spoke about, statistician and data scientist, that kind of a skill coming in. I think the other skill that we as security professionals will now start having to understand is also getting a little bit of business knowledge, especially in the sector that, let's say, you are possibly working on. If you are a core
Of
IT
course, yeah.
professional, yeah.
Hmm.
So, how does the business operate? And therefore, what is critical for them? Understand that. It's not the vulnerability, but the vulnerability, what will it exploit? It's not the threat, but that threat, if it actually fructifies, and if it is a danger to the organization, which part of the organization, where will it really hit the organization to impact its business? That is the understanding that also we need to start getting in, so that when we tell them so much cyber security related data, because and so let me put it this way. Also, the other thing I see is, uh, when big data came in, and all these organizations started gaining advantage from all that customer related data that they collected.
Hmm.
I think it's time for us cybersecurity professionals to start taking advantage of that. Where, and for the longest time, people have been saying, right, data is the new oil. So why aren't we exploiting, as cybersecurity professionals, the cybersecurity data that we have? The reason is because we are lacking on these two aspects. One is understanding data like a data scientist, and two is understanding what is critical to my business or the client. If you're an IT service organization, for example, or my client, to them, what is most critical as a business is something that I need to understand.
Yeah, yeah, I think this clarifies it very well. I think there can be a number of vulnerabilities, issues, or indicators that you're seeing, or threats that you're seeing that directly touches upon this critical data. Whether it is in a separate place where it is where the systems are or not, the clarity is a lot with respect to if you start looking at it from the data lens.
Yeah.
While you were talking about it, I also remembered that There are in certain cases in my experience when directly the transactions are hit, like for example,
Hmm.
and this is much easier for logical threats to be explained. For example,
Sure.
if you've done a manual testing and you come up with a way of buying products for free, or in one of the cases we could buy tickets for free, for that particular application.
Hmm.
That then meant that hey, if this is possible, then everybody will be buying it for free, which means loss of
Correct.
X amount. So
Yeah,
it was much easier to call this out, and it was taken as a critical issue, and resolved as well, very very much faster. But
absolutely.
then alongside there was another issue, which was it was like a DOS issue, and they did
Yeah.
not have DOS protection, and they had APIs, bunch of APIs, which also we called out. But they were like, so what? It's all
Yeah.
right, and it's all working fine. And next time when we went there after a year, it was that issue that was being exploited, and now in a big way. Like they had to go get the Akamai protection and a lot of other things, and this is after months of exploitation in
Yeah.
this area was already happening. So
Yeah.
this deprioritization is something that we've seen upfront, but some of these issues with data, with transactions, with direct financial losses much easier for business folks to understand.
So which is, yeah, so which is what, so we don't wait. It's so it if I can put it this way, these metrics and the reports that we generate out of these metrics for people to understand, the business to understand, or at least for the people who matter at the end of the day within an organization, whether it's the leadership or the board of directors, a stitch in time saves nine. And that is the message that, we would want to communicate to them, that don't wait till, and for them also what happens is, see, it's a learned, it's a learning, right, for you, because I am used to seeing my profit and loss. I'm used to seeing my, HR updates, so many people hired, so many people not, left the organization. Basic, I'm just getting very, very basic. But from a cybersecurity standpoint, nobody has come and spoken to me in that language.
Yeah.
If you start coming and talking to me on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, tell me, hey, you know what? In the organization, my R&D most critical, uh, depending on whatever organization, product organization, pharma organization, let's say, R&D is most critical. There is a lot of critical data over there. The protection measures are put over there from an IPS, IDS, network security, cloud security, all those controls. This is where we stand. And therefore, we are doing well. There is a trend, you show me the trend, you show me the, you show me how I'm doing in terms of the awareness of the people on the floor in a factory. So some of those elements is something that when I start seeing it on a periodic, regular basis, one, I will also start understanding it if I am the non-security person.
Hmm.
Two, I will start imbibing the importance of it. And three, I will know what actions I need to take, who do I need to question, and who do I need to provide the solution to, or if I need to provide a support. It may not always be a solution. CISOs are typically pretty capable of, handling these matters on their own, but if they need a support, because they say we don't have talent at times, we're always a talent shortage, or there is
Yeah.
always a budget shortage, right? Or, there are things which are just stuck within approvals to say, because I'm not understanding the reason for us to have another IPS or have another, scanning tool. Why do I need to have two separate scanning tools, and so on and so forth. So some of those, when that understanding is provided on a timely basis, the leadership is more accepting of those matters also.
Yeah, that's I think very realistic take on, if what if I was a non-security leader, how I would think about it. But since we're on the topic of business risks, I just want to extend this a little further and understand from a leadership standpoint now that we have derived the business risks, what is the real risk to the business and where is it coming from? How do we go to the next stage and define the right kind of or strategic security initiatives from these business risks?
Sure. So, okay, I will take, an example, one from tech risk, one from people risk, and one from supply chain risk. Okay.
Okay,
Uh,
great. Yeah.
I'll come to the why the third one. Okay. Tech risk. So I'll tell you, in terms of identifying what is my critical infrastructure that is supporting my critical business functions. Like I mentioned, right, in a bank, a core banking solution. In a manufacturing organization, typically my ERP and the applications that support my factory floor, right? Because a lot of even the factory uh,
Okay.
systems are digitized today. Okay, if you go
Yeah,
to an
yeah,
auto manufacturing organization, you'll see. And we've seen a lot of our cars, etc., are fitted with IoT devices. So obviously there is a
yeah.
strong element of digitization over there as well. So some of these elements now, identifying one is what is absolutely business critical, and therefore what is the critical infrastructure, IT infrastructure, digital infrastructure supporting these business functions. And then understanding, what is the vulnerability landscape, what is the threat landscape on this, how are these being monitored on, regularly, are the P1, P2 incidents being addressed correctly, in time, sufficiently. Some of these aspects automatically start coming up to say, banking, core banking is my, let's say, critical. I mean, we'll just take it for simplicity's sake. Manufacturing ERP is my critical infrastructure. For say another organization, one of its other core application. What else can we take as an example? Retail.
Health,
Yeah, health. Okay, right.
health,
So patient
retail.
information. Yeah.
Yeah,
So patient information.
yeah.
Right. So these are the three, let's say, my absolutely core. Now, what is the supporting, even if it is cloud infrastructure that I'm using? In a lot of cases now, there's a lot of dependence on cloud. If
Hmm.
I'm using cloud, now, if I'm using cloud or if I'm using on-prem, whatever may be the case, how are my vulnerabilities getting reported? How am I managing incidents, if any? Or at least are these being integrated with my SOC and SIM also, with my IPS and IDS? What are the kind of firewalls around these particular applications? What is the kind of network security elements that are there in place? And who is monitoring and who is managing this, so that is, these are the elements that I need to look at it place, right? Now, typically large organizations, they will say we have everything in place, but are you assessing it, let's say, on a at least an annual basis to say whatever we did, was it enough or was it not enough? Uh, like a ransomware attack can hit you from anywhere, and then you cannot do. Then what is my incident response cycle? Do I have something in for which I can respond in T minus 2 hours, if not
Hmm.
lesser than that? So if not, one is obviously you do the assessment or all of this and then do that measurement around it. If not, then yes, it becomes a strategic initiative for me from a tech risk point of view,
Okay.
right? Because to say this is absolute priority and critical, so let's make sure all our efforts, resources, and when I say resources, it's not just financial, but my best of people, my best of vendors, all of that is put in focused over there, and I'm making sure that when I do a reassessment, let's say a year down the line, I'm in a better position than I'm reporting in this year, right? That is from a tech risk perspective. People risk perspective, my awareness campaigns, we run, HR has a mandate. You have these certain 15, 20 questions, or you have gamified, awareness campaigns that are run by most organizations today. Great, excellent. Everybody's earning a silver badge or a gold badge, and all of that is fantastic, right? Now cut, and then you also are running phishing simulations almost on a monthly basis. Now most organizations, they'll send you an email, and you have
There are more simulations than real attacks.
actually, right? So I went through the awareness campaign. I went through a phishing simulation. I cleared everything with flying colors. I earned my gold platinum badge, whatever, top 100 employee in information security awareness or whatever. Now there is an actual phishing attempt on me, right? Or, of late, there are a lot of these scam calls. A lot of us receive that scam
Hmm.
calls, scam emails, right? You never know what kind of a frame of mind you may have been, and you may fall victim to that. So I'm a top 100 security awareness employee of the year in my organization. But something came, it, hit a weak spot for me. Let's say I'm very fond of jewelry, for example. So there was somebody who ran a scam to say, if you buy, 10 grams, you get 10 grams free, or some such thing.
Hmm.
And it exploited a weak link for me. I clicked on it. Bam, there is a malware inserted, and everything's come to a standstill. Now, where it's that correlationship is never there, if you really ask me, Neelu, today. Because,
Hmm.
my HR is reporting, I've completed, so on and so forth. My incident team is reporting something else. Now,
Okay, okay.
you
Got it.
get what I'm saying, right? So my HR team and my incident team tell me, when in which organization have they spoken to each other? Right?
Not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, unless somebody goes absconding with a laptop, I do. I in and some of those incidents is when I've seen, the incident team reaching out to the HR, give me that person's address and give me that person's background verification and this and that, and that's the only time when it is probably, having some converse link between the. Otherwise, in these kind of incidents, we've never seen any kind of conversation between the two, whereas they should be talking to each other. You know, the incident team should be getting a report from HR to say, hey, you know what, so many people have completed. Typical, so please make sure that if there is ever an incident reported on them, report back to us so that we can take the right action with this person, or we can, put them on a more stringent training program or so, or if that means they have to be penalized, so be it. So that correlation and therefore that becomes a strategic initiative again, to especially the people I need to monitor. I don't need to maybe monitor everybody within the organization, but say if you're a retail organization, or you're an FMCG organization where you have people on the ground, on the floor, sorry, in the market, right? Who use your mobile devices like your laptop or your tablet or your mobile phones to punch in your sales data. Now, that is critical data for me as an organization, because every region sales data ultimately gets correlated. Now, if that person is going to fall prey to some sort of a ransomware or a malware kind of attack, my numbers are going to look skewed, and then it's a domino effect, right? At the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? So that is one that becomes a strategic initiative to identify which are my biggest group of people at risk from these kind of scams and some, these kind of security breaches, and what do I need to do additional to make sure that that does not happen. Okay.
Okay, okay.
So
Yeah.
that's my people risk and strategic initiative related to people risk. Third, supply chain. Now, the reason why supply chain is becoming more critical, and therefore there are strategic initiatives, getting introduced for managing a supply chain risk, because the organizations are more decentralized. There is a lot of dependency on a lot of external parties, because at the end of the day, everybody has started saying, hey, this is like yesterday I was talking to somebody from a large banking organization, and they said we are trying to outsource a lot of our security operations, and putting it onto contract, because security is not our core business. We are a bank, which, if you look at it in that sense,
Technically,
is
yes.
technically yes,
True,
right?
true.
Yeah. And security people don't come cheap, or they don't come easily.
Yeah.
So, for them, it's almost like a business overhead, that, why am I paying such top dollar to these people when I can just hire an IT services organization or somebody who can manage, who has more core knowledge of cybersecurity for me.
Yeah,
But having said that, that means I am increasing my dependency on my suppliers, on my vendors.
true.
Right?
Yeah.
And therefore, yes, when I bring, yes, it is not my core business. And therefore, yes, I need to bring in a third party to help me support my, say, cybersecurity or sometimes even my other initiatives, which are not my core business. I need to tighten and strengthen their screws on them from a security and data protection point of view. That, hey, you're dealing with my data. I am a bank. My data is very, very critical. And whether that is my customer data, my employer data, my financial statements, whatever you may have access to, it is very critical for me. So what are you going to do to make sure that this is critical? Now, a lot of times, and we've seen, right, especially in these SOC 2 kind of assessments, it's a tick mark,
Hmm.
right? The vendor will say, yes, yes, we've done this. Yes, yes, we've done that. And, evidence you ask for, yeah, yeah, see, I have proof. I am doing everything to the T. But it's solar winds happens and everything falls to the ground, right?
Create evidence first and start work later.
Exactly. Yeah, that is also, those are also situations, right? So therefore, then how do I make sure that, I have a comprehensive program to manage my critical suppliers? Because again,
Hmm.
there are categories within suppliers also, right? So how do I, so that is another strategic initiative. And a lot of organizations, at least in the last 5 years or so, I have seen have started taking that up. Now, the thing again they're missing is the reporting. Am I asking the right questions? Am I getting
Hmm.
the right metrics to measure? And, am I taking, uh, you know, penal actions against the ones who are violating? Typically, a lot of times organizations don't. Off late, it's only in the last about 2 years or so I've heard where, a vendor lost their contract because they did not meet their cybersecurity requirements. It was
Ah,
not,
okay.
yeah. So which is very critical.
Rare though.
Yeah, and rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at least we're getting there, right? If
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
in, in hundreds, if you get even two such incidents, at least I would take it as a win.
Yeah, it's a good example to set. I think it's a very interesting aspect that you bring in, which is a supplier aspect, because most of the times we're looking at internally within our network perimeter boundaries, and even when things went remote, we're thinking of endpoint and people going around. Our attack surface is of course much bigger.
Yeah,
But the supplier side is very interesting. A lot of breaches are also happening through suppliers, and changing suppliers is a big space which nobody wants to get into. So there are other operational challenges that we often
correct.
think of before even questioning them, which you so rightly brought out. But from the perspective of, so these are, you've well covered all these three areas from the perspective of business risks and now strategic initiatives, which often point us to starting, for example, the right kind of security programs that will actually
Yeah,
measure these, which will actually have the right kind of questioning for, the suppliers and other, for vendors, for your look at your entire supply chain, depending on what you are looking to, fix in the
yeah,
organization.
yeah,
When we do start these security programs, though, often the goal is clear,
yeah,
but we keep defining how we reach there. But
yeah.
there comes a time when you have to think of what kind of metrics do we actually measure to
Hmm.
be able to say that we have remediated or brought down the risk, or our posture is corrected. And I want to now actually maybe talk a little beyond vulnerabilities, because many times traditionally I've seen we look at number of vulnerabilities identified or number of vulnerabilities fakes. These are very traditional ones.
Hmm.
How do you look at it? What do you suggest? When should we go for defining the metrics, and what are the kind of metrics that at a program level should we define?
Sure. Okay. So typically the way what we do is we define the metrics typically per domain as one. Okay, so there are multiple ways to do it. Let me put it this way. Okay. One is, let's say I have a compliance to adhere to, right? And now with Europe having to go with DORA and NIS2, or a lot of organizations have always in the past looked at NIST, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
and now NIST has brought in the govern aspect. So govern, identify, protect, detect, right, and recover. So you can define your metrics looking at these aspects
Okay.
of your cybersecurity cycle, right? Or you can say my access governance, my sorry, my uh, technology governance. So, when I say technology governance, it encompasses all your attack surface management, your cyber resilience,
Oh,
incident
okay.
response, your what else can be included in that? Your cloud environment, right? Because if you're hosting your own cloud, for example, all of these
Hmm.
are there, are considered as an element. People obviously is another element, supply is another element, and then my effectiveness of a lot of these, and my asset management. That is one of
Okay.
the very critical aspects, right? So you can do either, you can use the NIST route where you look at govern, identify, protect, detect, recover, or you look at each of the domains that you have. Uh, Either you are, yourself handling it, or you have it outsourced to a larger IT service player or whatever may be the case. And then within this, now what do I want to measure? So let me take an example, right? Assets, right? We've not spoken much about assets, so I'll touch upon that a little bit. So one is, uh, number of assets that, say, for example, the percentage of discovered assets not tracked in my asset management system, or number of systems and applications that have not been risk classified, number of assets with no nominated owner, okay, or percentage or number, whatever you may want to measure it as, right? So let's say these are the three key metrics within asset management as a domain, for example. Now,
Okay.
what is the data that I need for for this? So percentage of discovered assets not tracked in my asset management solution. What do I need? I need the number of assets that actually I discovered. Maybe it was, very, very tedious and a very, very uh, painful exercise of physically sitting and calculating it. Or I am doing a correlationship with another tool like your scanning tool or some other tool,
Huh.
where you
Attack
are like, yeah,
surface
exactly.
management tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, that is where you have, right? And the total number of assets that are tracked in my actual CMDB or whatever asset management that I may be using,
Hmm.
right? And then dividing that by the number of assets that have been actually discovered through the, physical exercise or the actual manual exercise or whatever other exercise, right? So this is where I will arrive at that percentage of with the correlationship has to be done where assets not tracked versus assets actually available in my infrastructure, right? Or something like, okay, so let's take another example. So these are some of the metrics that I can define. Governance, okay, let's take another example around governance. So percentage of audit findings that were unsatisfactory or needed improvement, and there was a rating of that given to them within the last 12 months versus findings that have not been resolved.
Okay.
Okay,
Hmm.
so for example, it's like I had 10 audit findings in my last year's audit, which were rated as unsatisfactory, needs improvement. And in my scale, these are two important aspects which need to be, adhered to. However, somewhere the ball got dropped because I couldn't identify an owner for any of these audit findings. And
Okay.
therefore, this, in my next audit, they have still come back as unsatisfactory. Or for that matter, they were probably needs improvement last time, and now they've come back as unsatisfactory because of the repetition of the same issue. And it could be anything, right? I mean, a lot of all of us who have been through security audits, or or even work in security, understand what kind of audit findings. So, something around like that, right? Another way of measuring, another way measurement is around the compliance risk itself. So a lot of
Okay.
financial organizations, in the US, a lot of the healthcare organizations, need to adhere to compliances which are well known, right? Your HIPAA, your high trust, or in banking, every country has its own
Yeah.
regulation for data protection within banking and financial services. Now, what is it that I need to measure over there? Regulatory. So percentage of high-risk legal and regulatory deficiencies identified in the last 12 months. That is, if I was doing an assessment, what is the percentage of high-risk deficiencies which would lead to high penalties have been identified, right? Number one. Number two, then on the basis of that, or let's say yesterday I paid a penalty, for example.
Okay. Okay.
So, I'll go back. So I paid a penalty. Why did I have to pay a penalty? Because that finding was material to a non-compliant finding in the audit, which never got caught or which never
Ah,
was
okay.
reported or was never resolved.
This is also quantified, so you can
Exactly. Yeah.
easily prioritize. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So that is one thing. Then another thing is a number of open findings from other external regulatory audits, right? One
As
of
in
these audit organizations came and did an audit on us, and, they identified uh, typical ones around access governance, around, assets not being scanned in Qualys, or sorry, not Qualys, but basically any
any vulnerability
yeah,
management.
vulnerability
Yeah.
scan, or a system sitting outside of my network security parameter, whereas it should not be over there and it should have been within my network security parameter, and
Okay.
things like that, right? Now, these were audit findings from an external auditor, which can lead to me, if I have clients and if these get reported externally, it will have a material impact on me. So how am I tracking that? So that number of external audits,
Hmm.
right? The findings around these material impact measures, how am I tracking that? And where am I tracking that? And where am I measuring it rather? Right?
Yeah.
Because what
Yeah.
happens is typically these audit findings get reported to the team that has been coordinating the audit. Now,
Yeah.
if so
Again.
you get what I'm saying, right? So
Yes,
it's
we're
like,
coming back to it.
yeah, it's like it never got reported to the team that is actually working, the operations team, which was actually on the ground, which should have
Hmm.
taken some action, and it was just sitting in somebody's laptop, and it had to be communicated, or for that matter, it got communicated to the leadership also. But the leadership doesn't know who it has to percolate down to, who will actually take the action.
Yeah, and just to just to simplify for the listeners here,
So,
so we are talking about, okay, in compliance, in your compliance audit or in your review, you figured the one of the doors is open as an
yeah,
analogy for a vulnerability, suppose,
yeah,
and this is
yeah,
non-compliance,
yeah,
but you're not stepping back and looking at how many such doors are open across your
absolutely.
organization
Correct,
and addressing that. So
correct.
of course, yeah, that's another space.
Yeah, yeah. So there are, some of the other measurement criteria that are defined by some of the others. Like, for example, Gartner has defined, outcome-based metrics. Okay, they call it outcome-based metrics. And what they do is the categories, the way they define it is protect, coverage, strength, benefit, friction. Okay, I'll explain what each of.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very interesting how they look at the metrics, right? So
Mm-hmm.
protect is measures a direct line of sight to a protection level. So typical, how you see protect, the way you see protect even in the NIST framework. That is what this really means. Coverage is exactly what we spoke about right now, right? The amount
Hmm.
of coverage for a control, or the amount of coverage that your cybersecurity landscape is providing, and is that sufficient or not?
Hmm.
Yeah, makes sense,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Strength. So some controls, now for example, the strength of a control or the strength of a measure that you have put in place from a data protection standpoint, I don't need to classify every document as highly confidential in my organization.
Hmm.
And therefore, I have those, levels, right? Private, public, confidential, secret, or highly confidential, however you define it, right? So that is the strength of my control depending on my situation that I am implementing.
So in this case,
Yeah,
just to simplify this, would it
yeah,
mean that if I have labeled documents as confidential
yeah,
or, highly confidential, restricted, depending on how we want to name it,
yeah.
the strength will depend on the control that prevents them from being accessed. Is
One,
it? Or
no, it is also uh, the data within that document. It's about the data, right? At the end of the day.
okay,
So what data is contained over there? Is it a top secret? Let's say, for example, to simplify it again, it is, I have a budget meeting tomorrow for which I'm going to announce my budget for the next year, FY25, for which I have allocated budgets across different initiatives. And these are
okay.
the initiatives that got approved. These are the initiatives that didn't get approved, so on and so forth. This is confidential, but
Hmm.
which is, if it is leaked internally within an organization, it may not have a damning effect. But if it is leaked outside,
Outside. Hmm.
then it has a, so there is a that demarcation that I'm going to make because of the nature of the information contained in that document. Make sense?
Okay. Okay. So I think in this case, since you're talking about data classification, doing the data classification, that itself is the control,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And doing it correctly for the right kind of data rather than trying to secure everything and increasing strength that way. Secure the right things and the strength
ex-
has to be apt.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. So I mean, these are the sort of categories, so that's what I'm saying. So, if you're really taking up a program to build metrics of within your organization, and so I'll tell you, okay, so let me then, there are various mechanisms available out there. Ultimately, one has to also see what benefits me as an organization, or what suits my environment the best, is what I have to look at. So I'll tell you, there is another organization that we've been talking to. It's a financial services organization based in Europe. Now, they have a certain reporting and a certain amount of metrics already available. Those metrics today, but when those metrics are reported to the leadership, they say it's very operational. I'm not
Okay.
looking at operational. So I am not looking at number of servers protected by my SOC, or number of devices part of my network security parameter, or the number of threats that are. I'm not interested in that. Now, they call it the first line of defense, because obviously, yes, people sitting front and center managing monitoring on a day-to-day basis are the first line of defense. The the team that is sitting and understanding the process, building the risk element around each of these, basically around the entire IT infrastructure, that is the second line of defense. So the reporting and the metric that they want, so the metric for the first line of defense is, yes, number of incidents, number of false positives,
Yeah. Yeah.
number of true positives,
Yeah.
all of that, right? Number of phishing attempts, number of phishing simulations done. But that is not the only metric. That is, in fact, not the metric that a business or a leadership wants to always look at,
Okay.
right? So I have to elevate this. So number of incidents and number of phishing simulations, can you make a correlationship? That is the metric that gets reported as a business imperative metric, if I can call it that, right? And that is something that the second line of defense in the team, which is more of the people who are facing the audits, who are facing the leaders, and so on and so forth, or even facing the suppliers, and so on and so forth. So those are the people, they want to build those metrics.
Okay, yeah, this clarifies this very much. Thanks for that insightful answer, Runa. Um, okay, so we've gone deep, but at the end of the day, what matters, I don't want to jump onto it straight, but just to put this politely, for any security team, right? We're all supporting teams. While we're bringing up a lot of these metrics and we are trying to remediate issues and get the right posture, um, for anything that we want to do, whether it is a security initiative, research and development for ourselves, making sure that you run programs across the organization, all of that is going at the end of the day from, many times from our own budget. And
Yeah,
then we have to look at the financial aspect. And that is,
of
I
course.
think, one of the things that many of us struggle at. And a lot of this conversation of what is our risk, what is our posture, what initiatives we have, often comes down to now what do we do next, and
Hmm.
that comes down to the budget.
Hmm.
Many times for smaller and medium sized organization, you'll have resource constraints, you'll have skill constraints, you'll have
Yeah,
particularly budget constraints. And that's why I wanted to ask this to you front and center, that okay, all the metrics talk is okay, but how do we actually ensure that our interpretation or the right interpretation of these metrics is leading to us, first of all, getting the budget, and then secondly also using it well. Because when we go to senior leadership, or security leadership is going to the CISO, the board, at the end of the day, you are always justifying why we
yeah,
want this, why
yeah.
it's important. How do we first of all have that conversation, and how do we get smart about getting the budget that we need?
Right. Interesting. So typically, most of the initiatives that I mean, just to give you a context, most of the initiatives that we've worked on, as far as building the metrics and building a report that is to be delivered to the leadership, we've always started as a prototype, right? Because you don't want to boil the ocean, okay? It to
Yeah,
start
yeah.
with. So practical challenges are there. Yes, I'm not going to shy away from saying that. And therefore, it's important that you try and use maybe some part of the business or some part of your whole cybersecurity landscape and say you will try attempting a report just using that particular section. Okay, that is number one. Number two is automation, and now with AI, right? So because AI will help. Yes, definitely AI will help. Once you have understood the data that you need and to how to extract the data, and then because the advanced version of this is going to be Gen AI based, where I should, as a
Hmm.
leader, should be able to, in my front end, whatever front end I may build, I should be able to say, where is where is my organization facing the highest number of threats, cyber threats, if I have to
Yeah.
put that prompt. My answer should come up to say, in your on your shop floor or in your POS machines, right? So that level of sophistication, yes, obviously it will take time, and you need that much data for the,
Futuristic.
yeah,
Yes.
future, but it's futuristic, right?
Yes.
Having said that, coming down to the so that's that, and it will happen, and I feel it will happen sooner than we can imagine because the technology is out there. It
Hmm.
is about building the back end, the LLMs, using the right kind of data, and I'm very certain that will happen. Having said that, for mid and small organizations, it is about how critical is it for you, right? That is the main question. That if you are highly digitized, do you not want to know where your threats are? Do you not want to know where your weakest link is, right?
Hmm.
Because and a small and medium organization, typically we've seen they are at the risk whenever they face any kind of a ransomware. A lot of times we've seen, a lot of these small organizations, medium organizations, when they have a ransomware attempt, they don't survive a lot of times, or they shell out so much money to get the data back from the perpetrators that they end up in a red. And if they were a profitable organization, if they had enough money, but they had to pay the ransomware, and then ultimately you are in the red. So do you want to avoid those kind of situations? Do you not want to learn from what is there out there in the market? Then in that case, and like I said, yes, initially they will not give you a lot of budget. Like I'm telling you, for an organization, and it's an India-based organization, I will not take any more semantics around it. We have told, given them a, the budgetary requirement is less than a lakh INR. We've said
Let,
yes.
let me breathe
Yeah,
twice.
exactly, right? And they are still thinking about it. So
uh,
it's the priority, right, for the organization that, what, where is your priority? And we are saying in that much money, we will build a prototype for you. You see the kind of insights, the kind of metrics that you can build,
hmm.
right? For that one section of your business, just let us do only for that section of the business. See the measurement, your people risk related measurements or your supply chain related measurements, what suppliers are at risk and what suppliers are doing well. you know get an insight on that. You will see the difference. And that is the conversation that one needs to have with the leadership also within the organization, to say, let me do a prototype. Because, yeah, I'll tell you the other challenge is a lot of times organizations don't know where their data is, number one. Number two, there is a lot of internal dynamics to get the data in.
Hmm.
Yeah. The SOC guy will say no, because it's also a personality thing, right? At the end of the day, I don't want to get myself showcased in a bad light.
In limelight, we call it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't want it to be in a bad light. I want to be in the limelight. I want you to show people that I'm doing a fantastic job, with the constraints that I have. Yes, we can do that, but you need to be able to give me that data.
Yeah, I think this actually is we've been talking about a lot of things actually. If I was to just simplify for the listeners, we're talking about not just gathering this information correctly and showing the right posture, because at the business end they need to look at a holistic picture that tells them what is the business risk, and it's actually businesses at the end of the day why we are doing security for, and that's where it should be pointed to. But also the risk appetites when it comes to budget, the risk appetite of the business, their regulatory compliance requirements, and also how much are they willing to face, like in terms of threats, and do they have that what is at stake particularly, because any growing businesses which are particularly, we are seeing a lot of disruptions happening in the business space also. So there's a lot of tech, there's a lot of good intellectual property that you would want to secure. So you have to hedge your bets
Yeah,
against whether how
exactly.
much you want to secure and how much you can live with.
Yeah,
So
true.
all right. Okay, I think this was a very insightful conversation, and there were a lot of new things that I got to learn, Runa. So thanks a lot for answering all these
Thank
questions
you.
for us today.
Thank you. I hope it will make sense to the listeners, because I have always felt this is something that, it's not thought through enough. And I am myself learning. So, I'm sure there will be comments and questions from the listeners as well. And I'll be happy to, see those as well, because every time I talk about this topic, it gives me more insight into what more can be done. And we're just scratching the surface right now.
Thanks for doing that with us here in this episode, and thanks everyone for joining us today at Breakpoint. We'll see you all in the next episode. Hey y'all! If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Breakpoint Security Podcast. Your support means that we can bring more such conversations back to you. Share with your friends and colleagues, and stay tuned for more episodes from Breakpoint. Until then, bye bye.